There are always three sides to every story. Your side, their side, and the truth. What's up guys, Acerthorn here, and today I'd like to talk about something a little bit more dour than the content I usually put on this channel. I previously made a video about the TikToker named D-Gene, a purported survivor of domestic violence at the hands of a narcissistic mother and later a narcissistic husband. In this previous video, I respectfully disagreed with her about one ultra-specific observation she made, and maintained that it is not in fact a trait of narcissism to simply mirror what others say and do. During that video, I made it clear that I still empathize with her overall, and that I wouldn't want to endure a tenth of what she had to endure. That being said, to quote another TikToker that I'm also following,
I don't know who needs to hear this, but I reserve the right to change my opinion based on new information.
And that is what has happened here. Recent videos that I have seen, not only by D-Gene herself, but also by therapists and psychologists who have expertise in the field of dealing with narcissists, as well as by other TikTokers who are diagnosed narcissists themselves, attempting to give an insider's perspective on how they think, has radically caused me to reevaluate how I feel about D-Gene's plight. For the record, D-Gene has recently blocked me on TikTok, so I cannot see any more of her videos unless I switch to a private window and log out. That's not what made me change my opinion about her, however. Rather, I already had my suspicions about her content. I posted a few comments expressing my suspicions, and then she blocked me without responding to those comments. Now, just to be clear, she has done absolutely nothing wrong by blocking me. She has the absolute right to block me from contacting her, as was established in 1971 by the Supreme Court. That being said, I find it incredibly sus in and of itself, independently of all the sus content I'm going to talk about in this video, that she blocked me literally as soon as I posted even the slightest disagreement with her without even attempting to engage with me. I wasn't even being super toxic towards her. Literally all I was doing was expressing my suspicions about her content. Suspicions she absolutely could have addressed if she wanted to. Seems pretty sus, isn't it?
Quick reminder from a licensed therapist. The truth never minds being questioned. However, a lie does.
Now, before I continue, I want to preface this by giving a disclaimer. This is not defamation. At no point in this video will I outright accuse D-Gene of lying. There's going to be a heavy implication of that, but that's only because that's a reasonable inference based on the things I do indeed state. The various things D-Gene says in her videos, the various ways in which they are inconsistent, and the various ways in which her statements don't make any sense when you stop to think about the ramifications thereof, all heavily imply that she might be lying, but I will not actively accuse her of lying. Rather, if the reasonable person would connect those dots based on what I do actually say, well, that's an indication that she needs to start publicly addressing these criticisms. So, D-Gene, if you're watching, feel free to go over what I'm saying in this video with a fine-toothed comb, and have a defamation lawyer do the same thing. I am writing the script for this video out word for word, and I am carefully considering what I am saying with each step. If your lawyer decides that this video crosses the line into potential slander, he can send me a cease and desist email, and I would be happy to enter into a two-way communication with him. As long as the communication is two-way and not simply a unilateral demand that I take this video down like the bitch that I am or get sued. And that transitions nicely into my next point. I am absolutely willing to talk this out with you privately, with or without a lawyer on your side. Check out my channel's About tab and you can find my business email. Reach out to me there and maybe we can come to a mutual understanding. Of course, that would require you actually engage with me, not simply block me on TikTok and call it a day. So to those of you who are new to this whole thing, let me take a moment to explain just what the deal is. So who even is D. Jean? Put simply, she is a self-proclaimed survivor of narcissistic abuse. She claims to have spent most of her entire life under the oppression of two separate narcissists. First, she grew up with a narcissistic mother, but once she became an adult and left her mother's home, it was out of the frying pan and into the fryer for her, as she quickly got scooped up by a narcissistic man who she ended up marrying. They remained married for 10 years, or so she claims, before she finally initiated divorce proceedings and pressed rape charges against her husband. On December 23, 2021, she posted this video.
Day 70 of my narcissistic husband being served in order for protection.
Again, that video was posted on December 23, 2021. So running the calculations, it appears that the protective order was served on or around October 14, 2021. Since then, she has dedicated her TikTok account to spreading awareness about narcissistic abuse and to give representation to the people like her who have been abused by narcissists. Her ex-husband has since been convicted of raping her and is now serving time in prison. So far, however, she has not identified her ex-husband by name or given any details that could potentially be used to track him down. Why she should care about not doxing him at this point is beyond me. After all, if she's telling the truth about him, then it's not like he can reasonably be expected to respect that boundary himself. This is yet another thing that may be considered sus. While I will not outright accuse her blatantly of having any illicit motive with this lack of identifying information, we must be mindful of the possibility that she is making sure that hers is the only side of the story we get, allowing her to completely and precisely control the narrative right down to every single minute detail. And before you say anything, yes, I'm aware that he would have gotten his chance to tell his side of the story when he stood trial for rape. That, however, is frankly of slight probative value, if it has any probative value at all. These days, a man can be convicted of rape with nothing but an accusation. As recently as 2012, the majority of states in the USA actively prohibited a rape conviction based solely on the alleged victim's uncorroborated word. There were also a ton of other problems with the way rape cases were handled that not only made it extremely difficult to convict someone of rape, but made rape victims extremely hesitant to even be willing to come forth in the first place, like the fact that defense counsel could cross-examine the victim about her own sexual promiscuity. For sure, the 2012 reforms made quite a few necessary changes, but they went way too far. Nowadays, we have the opposite problem. Instead of it being way too difficult to convict someone of rape, it's now way too easy. Nowadays, all a woman has to do is just point the finger and say those 3 magic words, "He raped me," and the man is basically guilty until proven innocent. So no, while I am not outright accusing you of committing perjury, I still am not impressed simply by the fact that your ex-husband was convicted. This is especially the case considering that you haven't shared with us the full transcript of the trial, owing to your aforementioned refusal to give us any details that could definitively identify him, so we have no way of knowing exactly what evidence was or wasn't presented. That being said, I have since come across a video from someone claiming to be an expert psychologist who specializes in working with narcissists and those who have been traumatized by narcissists. Unfortunately, I can't show you the video because it was taken down for some stupid reason. However, this woman explains that those who are genuine victims of narcissistic abuse tend to stay far away from social media for quite a long time after escaping. Not because they don't want to give their exes something to stalk, but because they just don't have the energy for it. After several years of narcissistic abuse, the victims are completely emotionally ravaged. She then goes on to speculate that the sudden surge of TikTok accounts from self-proclaimed victims of narcissism are probably abusers themselves, who are simply playing the victim just to get attention. Of course, as a professional psychologist, she was quick to disclaim that she cannot make a specific determination on any one TikTok channel, because it is egregious malpractice to diagnose someone without having that person in front of you. Armchair diagnoses, as they are informally called, are almost never reliable, and as an actual professional who does formal diagnoses for a living, she'll be the first to tell you that. This is yet another reason why I am taking care not to outright make any accusations against DeGene in this video, only pointing out the inconsistencies and numerous red flags. I'd like to drive that last point home by emphasizing that I have yet to catch DeGene red-handed in the process of lying. I've seen several inconsistencies with her videos, but many of these statements can at least be hypothetically reconciled. The first and foremost problem is that she outright calls her ex-husband, as well as her mother, narcissists. Bear in mind that she does not claim to have any expert credentials when it comes to narcissistic personality disorder. This is important to note because, as actual experts frequently point out, it is not uncommon for laymen to confuse narcissistic traits with full-blown NPD. To be diagnosed with NPD, you have to display 5 of the 9 symptoms, meaning that only showing 4 symptoms might make you a scumbag, but it doesn't mean you have NPD. More importantly, in order to even reach the 9-symptom test in the first place, the patient has to already fit the criteria for a general personality disorder. Only by passing that initial threshold can psychologists even begin to narrow down the diagnosis into more specific varieties. This is a common misstep that a lot of armchair psychologists tend to overlook. For example, one of the authors of the DSM, the primary authority that guides individual doctors in making diagnoses, points out that Donald Trump mostly does not have NPD, even though he tends to exhibit 9 out of 9 symptoms, because he doesn't fit the criteria for a general personality disorder, so the 9 symptoms test doesn't even come into play at all. However, I will not call DeGene a liar, and it's not just because I don't want to get sued. It's because she is far from the only one on the internet to fall victim to this common misconception. She could absolutely be genuinely sincere in her belief that her mother and ex-husband were narcissists and be acting in good faith ignorance of the fact that she is utterly unqualified to make that assessment. It is absolutely possible to be wrong without being a liar. Her next recurring accusation against her ex-husband, however, is a bit harder to reconcile. She repeatedly states that her ex-husband would abuse her in the privacy of their own home, but repeatedly act friendly and even romantic towards her when they were out in public. There's not a whole lot of ways you can reconcile her believing this despite it being false. Either she's telling the truth or she's lying, there's no in between. However, it is important to remember that this accusation is inherently unverifiable. The whole point of this accusation is that the abuse happens behind closed doors where there are no witnesses. Nobody can verify whether she's telling the truth or not, and no, his conviction does not convince me of anything for reasons I've already discussed. Now, combine that with the fact that, unlike in court, her side of the story is the only side we're getting, and the fact that she isn't even giving very many details about what exactly he did, means that we should take her story with a grain of salt. However, there is one specific thing I feel the need to point out that not only raises suspicion, but directly contradicts what DeGene says. There is another TikToker called Danielle Radin. On her main page, she claims to be a certified domestic violence counselor, so while she may not have quite as much expertise as a full-blown psychologist, she still has infinitely more credentials than DeGene herself. According to her, the very fact that DeGene's ex-husband didn't abuse her in public is actually a point against him being a narcissist.
A narcissist will use public humiliation to keep you in line. They will ridicule you in front of their friends, call you mean names. The friends might be used to it, so they don't even say anything, and you are left completely embarrassed.
This is especially problematic considering that she is accusing her ex-husband of being a narcissist specifically. Not just any other type of abuser, but a narcissist in particular. According to most experts, narcissists are supposed to follow a single, ultra-specific pattern of behavior. If they don't follow this exact mold, he may still be a scumbag and an abuser, but he's not a narcissist. So the fact that D-Jean's ex-husband, by her own admission, broke from this formula is a red flag as to her own credibility. Next, she points out how defensive her ex-husband used to get when she confronted him about his infidelity. She says he started cheating on her a mere 2 months after they got married, and when she confronted him about that, his reaction to the accusation was on par with a 5-year-old throwing a tantrum. Her words, not mine. However, once again, her complete lack of details means we cannot truly judge what really happened. First of all, what exactly did he do that she considered cheating? Not everything a man does within a 1-mile radius of another woman is cheating. Did he have sex with this other girl? Did he make out with her? Did he fondle her private areas? Because those are the only 3 things I can think of that would automatically qualify as cheating without the need to consider anything else. Literally anything short of those 3 things and it might still be cheating, but we have to consider the totality of the circumstances before I would feel comfortable making that call. And even if you are accusing him of doing one of those 3 things, do you have any actual proof that he did these things? Or were you just jumping to conclusions because of a few texts you happened to catch a glimpse of without even seeing the full conversation and therefore not understanding the full context? We don't know because she doesn't tell us. Then there's the reaction itself. You say he threw a fit when you confronted him about that. But again, we need to look at the totality of the circumstances, which in turn means you need to tell us the totality of the circumstances. First of all, adultery is a very serious accusation, one you should not make to your husband lightly. I honestly understand how he would be feeling. It absolutely sucks to be falsely accused of something, especially something as horrendous as cheating on your wife, and especially if, as I suggested earlier, the accusation is based on little more than a total nothing text that's divorced from its original context. Then, I also want to know exactly what she said to her husband when she confronted him about the cheating. How do we know she wasn't the one completely losing her shit against him? Now, some of you, perhaps those of you who've been cheated on before, might insist that she was justified. After all, nobody likes being falsely accused, well, nobody likes being cheated on either. Well, that's just it. How do we know he was cheating on her? Because she said so? Again, the totality of the circumstances is important, and her failure to give literally any details whatsoever is a red flag. And that transitions me to my next point. She, as well as many other alleged victims of narcissism, often point out how narcs will keep track of every single itty-bitty thing you do, and they'll bring these past transgressions up every time you have an argument in order to smear you and point out how this is a pattern on your behavior. But if you dare try to bring up anything he did in the past that was similar to what he's doing in the moment, he'll get mad at you for harping on the past and bringing up dead and buried things. I am politically independent. I am liberal on some issues, conservative on other issues, and libertarian on other issues as well. As someone who regularly watches pundits from all sides of the aisle, I have noticed quite a bit of hypocrisy from all sides. Ironically, the most hypocrisy I see is when pundits are themselves calling out the hypocrisy of their opponents. Here's a few words of wisdom to anyone who thinks they're a hero when they call someone out. Whenever you call someone a hypocrite because they do A but not B, you risk exposing yourself as a hypocrite because you are doing B but not A. Take, for example, the seemingly conflicting political issues of abortion and getting vaccinated. In the United States, Republicans tend to oppose abortion, seeing it as little more than the murder of babies, but they oppose mandatory vaccinations, believing that you have the right to control over your own bodies. Democrats look at these two positions and see nothing but hypocrisy. Why do these Republic cunts believe in bodily autonomy for a vaccine that is proven to save lives, but don't believe in a woman's right to bodily autonomy? However, remember what I just said. Whenever you call someone a hypocrite because they do A but not B, you risk exposing yourself as a hypocrite because you are doing B but not A. Honestly, by the Democrats' own logic, aren't they hypocrites too? Because they believe in forcing people to get COVID vaccines, but believe that people have a right to kill their own baby? Now, I am not going to go into detail about my particular beliefs regarding these two political issues. I am merely highlighting the hypocrisy between the two political parties. I am considering starting up a politics channel where I can go into more detail about these things, but this isn't the time or the place for that discussion. Rather, let's get back to talking about Jean. She, as well as many other self-proclaimed victims of narcissism, call their exes hypocrites because they continuously keep track of their every transgression and use that as ammunition in every single argument. But by that logic, what gives you the right to keep a mental note of his past transgressions? And he's overreacting if he gets frustrated at that practice, but you get equally frustrated when he does the exact same thing. What exactly is the rule here? Under what circumstances is it okay to remember something your partner did in the past and bring it up during an argument? And when should the past remain in the past? Do you actually have a good reason for this double standard? Maybe you do, but that's all the more reason why you need to give us the fucking details. However, those are all instances where I see problems with her story, but these problems are not completely irreconcilable. Perhaps she is indeed telling the truth and her videos only appear inconsistent because of how vague she is about them. However, she has recently started posting videos that I find to be entirely at odds with her stated position. Specifically, she makes videos listing the red flags where you can tell someone is a narcissist, and these signs are literally her channel in a nutshell. First, she gives signs to look out for when telling if a woman is a narcissist. Listen to these signs and tell me she isn't describing herself.
They are always the victim. They are always the damsel in distress that needs your help. Something bad is always happening to them. People are out to get them. And the second that they don't get their way, you call them out on their shit hits the fan. Now they're threatening to make false reports to the police. They're threatening to blackmail you. Maybe they actually get a restraining order under false pretenses. They go around trying to convince the people that upset them that they are a villain, an evil villain. So in a society that believes that women are always the victim, watch out, guys.
Jean, honey, isn't that literally your entire channel in a nutshell? Isn't your entire channel dedicated to explaining how you were the victim of a narcissistic husband? You literally just exposed yourself as a series of red flags. You mentioned how they threatened to make false reports to the police, and here you are, having him thrown in prison on rape charges when your only evidence of the rape is your uncorroborated word. Oh, but it gets better. In a more recent video, she actually identified several ways that an outsider could tell who is the abuser and who is the victim. Once again, the telltale signs she gives heavily suggest that she is the one we should assume is the abuser.
The abuser is probably going to be talking themselves up and insisting that they're the victim. The abusers are going to be the ones going around to anybody that will listen saying, oh, my partner is just abusive. They're abusive towards the kids, or they're crazy, they're mentally unstable. And if you pay attention enough, you're going to notice that they lie about a lot of crap. The victim, on the other hand, is a totally different story. They're going to be talking up their abuser. They're going to be making excuses for their poor behavior. The victim isn't going to say anything to you at all, except if you build up enough trust with that person, they might open up. They're going to make excuses for the abuser. They're going to say, well, I did this wrong too. Either way, the victim is probably going to be taking some fault and accountability in every situation for the abuse that's happening to them. So while the abuser is going around saying, yeah, everything is just awful, my life is awful with them, the victim is going to be saying, well, it's not all bad. There's, good days too.
So that's basically you, isn't it? You're the one insisting your ex was abusing you. But according to your own logic, if you were the victim, you should be trying to build him up and make excuses for his behavior. But then there's a fairly recent video she made where she encouraged victims of narcissistic abuse to stay off social media. In this one, she really comes dangerously close to exposing herself.
Do not accept friend requests. Do not. For a long while.
It took a long time? What exactly counts as a long time? Remember that the first video on your channel discussing your abuse was allegedly published a mere 70 days after your ex-husband got served with the order of protection.
Day 70 of my narcissistic husband being served an order for protection.
Less than 3 months after you quote-unquote escaped your abuser, you started posting TikToks to smear him. Like I said previously, actual psychologists and therapists have found it extraordinarily rare for actual abuse survivors to get on social media and talk about their abuse so soon after escaping from it. Instead, finding it much more likely that this sudden swarm of TikTokers, of which DGene is only one of them, to be abusers themselves masquerading as victims for internet clout. And that's only when they've escaped one narcissistic relationship. Bear in mind that DGene is a special case. She didn't just escape a marriage with a narcissistic husband, she spent pretty much her whole life in narcissistic relationships. She was raised by a narcissistic mother, and as soon as she was old enough to leave that household, she almost immediately got scooped up by a narcissistic husband. Think about that for a minute. She only spent a couple of weeks out of the grasp of a narcissistic relationship, and before she was even able to fully process what she had been through, she suddenly finds herself trapped in another one. It's that unique scenario that makes DGene so unique compared to all the other former victims who make videos discussing the abuse they've suffered. So it is highly unlikely, according to the experts, that she would have the courage to start making videos about her abuse less than 3 months after escaping it. But that becomes exponentially more sus when she's not only free from her abusive husband, but is free from abuse, period, for literally the first time in her life. At this point, she should practically be a feral child to healthy relationships, having no idea what freedom even feels like. It should be a completely foreign concept to her. How could she possibly process her newfound freedom in less than 3 months' time when she literally has never known any life outside of it? But here's the real kicker. If you really are the abuser and not the victim, it's actually okay to own up to it. You absolutely can gain a sizable social media following by openly acknowledging that you're a narcissist and that you're the abuser in your relationships. I am currently following not one, but 2 channels on TikTok who self-confessed diagnosed narcissists. One is a woman named Lilith, and the other is a man named the Nameless Narcissist, who openly shares his name with us, so the alias makes no sense.
So I know you guys don't know my name, but my name is Jacob Skidmore. I don't give a fuck. Try to find me.
Anyway, both of these accounts have followings that are even larger than yours, demonstrating that you absolutely can get loads of narcissistic supply without even having to lie about it. Of course, doing so typically requires that you own up to your own toxicity and publicly acknowledge how much of a shithead you are.
I talk about in my videos how I feel remorse now, but I never felt remorse before, and I had to work to feel remorse. I had to learn that skill. I had to learn how to care about other people.
Yes, narcissists can be toxic. Yeah, some narcissists will cheat. Yeah, some narcissists will be abusive.
For those that don't know, I have an amazing partner. He's a wonderful, wonderful person. I do not know how I have him. I do not deserve him. He is great. And I've done a lot of work to get here, but even with all the work that I've done, I still fuck up. I still break trust. I still do selfish acts. I still do all of these stupid fucking things. And honestly, I almost lost my partner today, and I'm very aware of that. And I probably should have lost my partner. And I also know that if I don't change my behavior and if I don't fix it and repair it and mend it with my actions, then I will lose my partner. And I deserve to if I don't do what I need to do to make things okay, because I'm the one that fucked up.
So for narcissists like myself, we view smear campaigns as like the ultimate act of revenge that we can do. And we genuinely think we're justified in doing it because, like, in our minds, you're already bad, so we need to make other people understand that you're bad, sometimes by making stuff up.
So if you really are a narcissist, it's going to take some powerful external stimulus, such as an actual diagnosis, to get you to have this level of self-reflection. The whole thing about narcissism is that it's very difficult to get them to accept accountability. However, one of the biggest red flags in her entire channel comes from her playlist Letters to the Judge. In this playlist, she reads out loud several letters that her ex-husband's friends and family had written to the judge after he was convicted in order to advocate for a more lenient sentence. Her goal was to pick apart everything they said, but she actually came dangerously close to exposing herself as a liar. In the second video in that playlist, that is the next to last video on the list, because TikTok playlists are almost always sorted based on most recently added, so these videos are listed in reverse chronological order, she reads a letter written by her ex-husband's lifelong friend. There are several excerpts where I have some choice words to say. First, she mentions how her ex-husband and the author of this letter actually met.
They start off by saying that they met in elementary school and they were friends in high school, blah, blah, blah. What he failed to mention is that they were in a cult.
What does that have to do with anything? Are they still part of that cult? Why should we hold that against them, even decades later, just because they had mingled with a cult for a brief period in their childhoods? Seriously, how does this discredit the friend's testimony in any way, shape, or form?
He then dove into about how he's such a good worker and he actually saved a life or two. Funny that he is referring to one of the 2 jobs.
Oh, no, you go back to how he saved someone's life. That is not something you can just gloss over and give us nothing but the stink face with. I want to know the details as to how he saved someone's life, god damn it! I mean, I want to know the details for a lot of what you're telling us about him, but this one in particular, it is a fucking crime that you pay lip service to such a heroic act.
Funny that he is referring to one of the 2 jobs that he managed to keep throughout our entire marriage.
Wait, him saving someone's life was connected to his job? In that case, what kind of job did he have? Was he a firefighter? An EMT? What the hell did he do for a living? And for that matter, what exactly do you mean by one of two jobs? You heavily imply that he was chronically unemployed, but you don't give us any, you guessed it, details. For example, you say you were married to him for 10 years. Well, if he managed to keep one job for 6 years and another job for 4, then that technically counts as him keeping 2 jobs for your entire marriage, but that doesn't exactly portray him in a negative light, does it? And then there's the hosting thing. Remember earlier when I said that this was the closest she came to exposing herself in a lie? Well, here's where that happens.
Says here that he was one to host a gathering. Actually, he would invite a bunch of people over to our house where he would then talk over everybody the whole time while I hosted things.
And that's the part I have a problem with. See, up to this point, you've given us detailless stories of how he's abused you, but the vast majority of them have no witnesses aside from the babies who are too young to even remember anything. But this is one instance where there was indeed a witness present. Your ex-husband's friend is absolutely qualified to contradict your testimony in this regard, since, he was there. It's a good thing you don't list anyone by name, because if you did, we would be able to reach out to this guy and get his side of the story. All he would have to do is list one thing, just one single solitary thing, that your ex-husband actually did to contribute to the hosting, and your lies have been exposed. It doesn't even have to be a very significant contribution, as long as it was tangible and it was actually done by your ex-husband rather than him taking the credit for all of your hard work. At that point, your entire story begins to collapse like a Jenga tower. The slightest crack in the bucket means it cannot hold any more water. Minor inconsistencies can typically be hand-waved away, saying that it's a matter of perspective, or that you don't remember all the details because it was years ago. But this would qualify as a major lie. You can't simply say that you did all the work to host everything when your ex-husband did literally anything to contribute. You might argue that you did the majority of the work and that he only did the easy stuff. At that point, it becomes a matter of perspective and subjective determinations, which means we need to know the details. But you aren't saying that. You're saying that he did one thing and one thing only, talk over everyone, and that you did everything else. There's no way you can reconcile that as a perception thing. Either you're telling the truth and your ex-husband's friend is lying, or he's telling the truth and you're lying. There is no in between. So in conclusion, I implore everyone watching this video to take this next line to heart. Do not believe anything you hear on the internet blindly and without fact-checking. Everything that everyone says on the internet is going to be inherently biased, and it is extraordinarily easy for people to lie by omission, and even to literally just make up credentials that they don't actually have. Any credentials a person claims to have should be independently verified, and you should also fact check to make sure these credentials actually mean jack shit.
Using deceptive language like licensed life coach in California to give the illusion of qualification or education, which is a title that Jeffrey probably paid for anyways, despite it having no accreditation with any professional institutions. Also, you don't need a license in order to be a life coach in California.
And then, when somebody is telling you their personal life stories, obviously those don't require expert credentials, but they do require a means of independent verification. If they are so stingy with the details that it becomes impossible to poke any holes in their story because the story is so threadbare to begin with, you should treat that as a red flag. You should assume that everything said on the internet is fictional, designed for entertainment, until proven otherwise. And with those words of wisdom, I bid you all adieu. Acerthorn out. Peace!